702.
World of Work.
So on our World of Work feature today, I want us to have a conversation about employees who remain in unhealthy work environments, because it's actually more complex than just thinking that someone stays, right? When you look at the issues that they often raise, whether it's burnout, stress, the toxic workplace cultures, those are no longer just fringe concerns. They've become quite central to how we understand the modern world of work. And that's why globally you've got so many employees now reporting record levels of stress and disengagement. And even here at home, that pressure is compounded by the tough economic climate, the high unemployment, the rising cost of living. But what's particularly striking is that even as more people openly acknowledge that their work environments are unhealthy, many are still choosing to stay in that employment. Whether it's the long hours, the poor leadership, the lack of recognition, or maybe it's just the emotionally draining workplace dynamics, the reality is that walking away isn't always a simple or accessible option. So it raises an important question. If people know their environment is affecting their well-being, what keeps them there? Is it purely financial pressure, or are there deeper psychological and cultural factors at play that keep employees feeling stuck? And what does this say about the way workplaces are structured and the expectations we place on people to endure rather than to thrive? And if you have been in a situation where the workplace, the culture, the dynamics are just toxic, it's not good for you, even emotionally, but you are still in that company, what are your reasons? What are your reasons? Is it the financial pressure? Is it the tough economic environment? And of course, the picture of unemployment in this country? Or do you have other reasons why you've decided to stick around with your own company, regardless of how unhappy you are working for it? Share your experience with us on 011-883-0702. You can also send a WhatsApp on 072-702-1702. Maiyo Febi is a global executive coach and organizational culture specialist who's going to guide us through this conversation. Maiyo, thank you so much for your time. Good morning.
Thank you. Morning. So good to be here. And before we get into it, I know this is probably off cue, but I just wanted to commend you for holding space on the previous topic that we talk about. That you talked about, rather. I caught the tail end of it, and as a coach, I just thought it would be useful to just share very briefly that many people are unable to move forward in relationships, in their jobs, in their family dynamics because of that one thing. It's the unlock for many, many people, and I've coached people through that because people say, oh, my boss is not treating me well, or I'm not happy in my relationship. But the thing at the core of that they actually need to confront and deal with is the acceptance. For many, many people, the unlock will look like acceptance that this person doesn't love me and I have to find the courage to move on. And that's deep work, it's painful work, but often that has been the unlock for the people that I've worked with.
Sure. So, what we're hearing, Maiyo, more and more is burnout. You hear that, more than before. A lot of people are talking about that. A lot of people are talking about how unhappy they are, but they're not necessarily leaving those jobs. What's driving that disconnect? What are you able to share with us?
So this is quite a layered and complex topic, and we obviously have a very limited amount of time to get into it. But some of the key themes that have come up, certainly in the work that I do, is that people, first of all, they recognize the burnout, but they're unable to move forward because when you confront your burnout, it then raises a new set of questions, because burnout isn't necessarily just being tired. It's also being exhausted emotionally, mentally, physically, having prolonged stress and having this sense of alignment within yourself that something is not quite right and I'm not quite sure what it is. So in order for you to confront that, you have to be willing to have very difficult conversations with yourself, because now the question becomes, well, what does feel right? What will energize me? And because we don't want to face that, it's much, much easier to just stay put because, hey, most of us are in careers based on expectations, based on societal expectations, our family, etc., etc. And like you rightfully said, the economy is not looking good. So everybody around you is telling you, but you're so lucky to have a job, but you have a home, you have a car. Like, why should you even think of moving? So burnout is something that we'd rather just neatly put away in a box and continue with the life that we know.
Yeah. So you've spoken about the survival mode, and I'm just wondering how that affects decision making in the workplace. How much of them deciding to stay is driven by that survival mode?
When we're in a state of stress and anxiety from burnout and we're in survival mode, what happens in the brain is that our rational thinking shuts down, and what gets activated is the amygdala, the fight and flight response, which is automatic. So when we're in that state, we can't make decisions. We think that if we leave, we're going to die. If we leave, we're going to be homeless. If we leave, our children won't be able to go to school, and then we catastrophize what the future could look like because we're not critically thinking, we're not logically thinking, we're just thinking based on this fear that if I look into what it is that I truly want, it's probably going to go wrong. So I may as well just stay put here. So it deeply, deeply impacts our decision making because we're not rationalizing and we're not contemplating the various scenarios, the various outcomes. We're just thinking about the worst possible thing, which is danger. And we need to get away from that danger. So it's much easier to just stay put.
So is that like a point where stress is now being normalized and people stop recognizing that they are, in fact, in a harmful environment?
Yeah, definitely. Stress is something that humans, generally speaking, in the world of work globally, are living with on a day-to-day basis. And it's normalized to the extent that everybody around us is experiencing it. So the people that aren't stressed out like we are, we tend to think that, that's just the exception. But the norm is that we should all be miserable, we should all be stressed here. But when we're courageous enough to look within and ask ourselves those deeper questions, which we don't want to confront, then we can begin to develop that self-awareness and start ordering our steps and making a plan on what it is that will energize us, what it is that will bring us joy, and something that's more importantly aligned with purpose and aligned with our values. Because many people tend to think that purpose and values are separate from your work. But your understanding of your purpose and your values greatly influences how you show up in any particular environment. And if you're not able to express that through the work that you do, then it's one of the contributing factors that leads us to burnout.
So what about then endurance? Because sometimes when you endure stuff in the workplace, that can often be mistaken for like commitment. And I wonder how workplaces have reinforced this entire idea. And my second question to that is, what do you think is the responsibility of employers here? What do they need to do?
So the first question with resilience and self-harm, endurance and self-harm in the workplace, it's idolized when you work hard, when you push hard and you're in go-go mode and you never stop to feel whatever it is that you're feeling, but you're just focused on performance. So when we're in that state, it cuts us off from our feelings. And some of us, naturally, we're more action-orientated. So generally speaking, human beings advance strongly in one of three centers. So some of us are deeply caught up in our thinking, some of us deeply in action, and others deeply in emotion. So the people that are go-getters and they're driven to constantly and consistently take action, it becomes much, much harder for them to take that breather, to stop, look around and say, what am I actually doing here? Is there something else that I want to be doing with my life? So we keep going to the detriment of our health and we ignore the signals that are there because our brains will always indicate to us that something is wrong, that something doesn't feel right. But if you don't stop and listen to that and you're just caught up in achievement, then it can easily pass you by and you end up harming yourself in the long run. And the interesting thing about these emotions is that in as much as we don't talk about them, it's not like they disappear. Emotions and feelings take up real estate in our minds, in our bodies, and it often manifests as sickness. So you'll find yourself having a constant headache, or there's a pain somewhere in your body, and you don't stop to think, but why have I normalized living with this pain? So it could be that built-up emotion over time that's telling you that this isn't right. We need to do something different. We need to become aligned. And the second, you asked the second question
about the employers themselves, because some of them, like I say, they see that someone is enduring here. Some people are not coping. Some people are here because of any other pressures, and I'm wondering, what is it that those employers can do? Is it all about just, organizational culture, like shifting that? What responsibility do they have here?
It's definitely a split responsibility. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a complex, layered conversation, but it's definitely the responsibility of both employer and employee. And a great place to start as an employer, if this is something that they've never actively thought about, is to expose people to information. It's to expose employees to self-mastery. What does that look like? And interestingly enough, one of the reasons that I left my very nice corporate job at MultiChoice was because I went on a workshop that MultiChoice offered all of its employees. And it was talking about change and what holds us back from change and how do we motivate ourselves to take action. So after going on that course, I knew that within 3 months I had to resign and pursue something that's more meaningful to me. So exposing people to information is the responsibility of the employer. And then with the employee, they have to be willing to go deeper within and ask themselves those hard questions. Because when you look at the latest stats, for example, from the State of the Global Workplace, which is produced by Gallup, it shows in there that 72% of employees within sub-Saharan Africa feel that they're struggling at work. So only 18% feel that they're thriving. Only 10% right at the bottom say that they're suffering. But the majority of people are in the middle, which is struggling, 72%. And these are people that are just getting by. They're doing just enough to make things work for themselves. But hey, it's not an amazing space to be in for whatever reason, but they just choose to continue. So having a two-pronged approach will really enable organizations to get to employees to that space to say, okay, maybe this department isn't for me. Maybe this company isn't for me. Maybe this area of expertise is something that I've run the course on. Now I want to do something different. So being curious as well as an employee is so important, because we can't point at the organization. And this is what most people do. They'll point fingers and say, if only my boss, if only the culture, if only this. But from the work that I've done, the moment that you empower a person to believe that they are responsible for building the life that they want ultimately, then it equips them to be able to take action towards what they really want.
011-883-0702. Are you one of those employees who remains working even at this unhealthy work environment? And what is your reason? Because, as Maiyo said, this is a very layered conversation. Some people may say it's the financial pressure. I need to take care of my kids. For other people, it may be other reasons. But what is it for you? Are you working in an environment that is unhealthy, that is toxic? And how do you deal with that every single day when you go to work? How are you handling that? You can send your WhatsApps as well on 0727021702. One of the WhatsApp texts that have come through comes from Anonymous, who says, "Hi, Clement. Anonymous here. It's so sad that I have emotionally and mentally checked out of my current employer, and I've made peace that my growth is kept, as I'm not the type they want in management. I have stopped attending company events, and I'm just coming here because of my financial benefit. I am actively seeking employment, and I can't wait for the day I find something else somewhere else. Kunzima, yazi. That's a message coming there on the WhatsApp line. And then another person was actually asking a question, Maiyo, about what the tell signs are. How do they know that they have reached that breaking point? They haven't resigned, but how do they know that they've reached that breaking point? Because like we said, for other people, some people are like, this is a workplace. That's what they've been told. These things happen in the workplace. Of course, you're going to feel like that in the workplace. But how does someone know that this is breaking point, this is unhealthy, I'm just enduring here, I'm not happy, and something's got to be done?
I'd be weary of saying that if you're experiencing these 5 things, then it's a sign, right? I can only speak from my experience and from the research and the insights that I have. So generally speaking, there are a few key things, but it doesn't mean that it will be the same for every single person. Like I said earlier about our personality. So to sum it up, it really is about looking at your emotions, looking at your mental health, looking at your physical health, and examining your stress levels, and also reflecting on your feelings. How do I feel? Am I obsessing about work all the time? Am I ruminating about situations? Do I feel like I've self-censored myself at work? In other words, I'm not speaking my truth. Do I feel drained and depressed and completely removed from the work that I'm doing? So those, generally speaking, are indicators for us to go deeper and start asking ourselves, okay, if this is not what I want, then what does what I want actually look like? Because in some instances, it could mean speaking up. It doesn't always necessarily mean leaving. We could be that person that takes up the fight and says, I am going to change this environment. And in that, we grow within the organization, we grow our influence, and we engage with people who are also feeling the same way. And we can be the change that we want to see, as cliche as it sounds. But that sometimes is the journey of certain individuals.
Here's a WhatsApp voice note that's come through.
Hi, Clement and team. I think for me, the workplace which I'm at, it's not toxic, but it's not in purpose, it's not in line with my purpose. So I forced myself to go because I have 3 children to feed, their school fees to be paid, and I think it's just me. What I'm currently doing is applying in the direction which I would like to go in, and just doing courses that are aligned to that. So,
thank you for that voice note, and all the best. Hey, I hope you find a place that because those places do exist, places where you'll feel privileged to be there. You feel, there's a proper support system, and you want to really all your energy take it out on making sure that this entire company succeeds, because the work environment, the culture just allows for that. Maiyo, what are the long-term effects, though, of staying in a toxic or draining work environment like that? Because some people will try and push it as far as they can, as you've said before, because of the different circumstances. Some people are trying to feed their families. So, if I leave here, where do I go? How am I going to pay for school fees? But how do you then, what's your advice, one, for people who are in that situation? Is it better to get therapy? Is it better to speak to a colleague who maybe understands the situation? How do you deal with something like that?
The first step that I'd encourage people to do is to ask themselves, what am I afraid of? What is it that I'm so terrified of that if I leave or if I speak up, then this thing is going to happen? Because fear is such a huge deterrent of people going for what they really want. And it's also about understanding that we never build anything of value within our comfort zone. At some point in life, we have to be willing to step out. We have to be willing to take that risk. But most of us, because we haven't clearly defined where we want to be, then we don't have that impetus, that energy, that motivation to step towards what we want, because we don't really know what it is. So facing our fears and understanding that to achieve something we've never achieved before, we have to become someone we've never been before. That's what will take us closer to where we want to be. And in terms of how do we address it now, I firmly believe that each and every one of us is living our purpose in some shape, in some form. Some of us are not aware of it. Some of us are completely aware of it. So I would challenge people to think where I am right now. How can I begin to live my purpose? It could be possible in your work environment. It could be possible outside. But taking a step towards what we really want gives us the energy and the inspiration. And when we focus our minds on what we want, then suddenly the path appears. We take that first step and then the next one reveals itself. And not to get caught up in thinking, but there's no jobs, it's really, really hard, because I've come across people, for example, when I went horse riding last year, there was a woman there, we were chatting, who works at the stable, and she was saying, I absolutely hated corporate, and I quit with nothing to go to because I knew that it was making me sick. So her going to do horse riding and managing stables and something, for some of us, that might feel like it's something completely crazy. But coming back to your question, what are the things that people will experience if they don't pursue their dreams? On the very, 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 very extreme end, I'm not going to lie, for some people it results in death. We read about people in the news that take their lives, that work themselves to the ground, that just suddenly one morning they never wake up, and a lot of it is to do with their work environment. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, what will happen is that voice will keep growing and growing within us. And at a certain point, it will manifest as sicknesses where we're not feeling well, where our mood, our attitude is just very, very negative. And there's an element of acceptance in that. So, again, it varies with some people. Others accept and they still continue to give their work. Others accept. It makes them feel worse physically, mentally, spiritually. So really honoring our journey and paying attention to who we are and what we want is the single most important thing that we can do for ourselves. Because like I said, it is our responsibility as individuals to build the life that we want. It is nobody else's responsibility, not our employer, our husband, our partner, our lovers. It is our responsibility, period.
Yeah, that's it. Maiyo Febi, thank you so much for guiding us through such an important conversation. She's a global executive coach and organizational culture specialist. That takes us to 11:31.